The United States may ease some of the sanctions imposed on Russia following its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. According to Bloomberg, advisors to US President Donald Trump are currently developing a corresponding plan.
Trump's advisors are sketching out how they might ease the sanctions imposed on Russia because of the war, including a cap imposed on prices for its oil sales, according to people familiar with the discussions from the Bloomberg publication.
At the same time, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham announced that he will introduce new legislation imposing additional sanctions on Russia as early as this week. He described the potential new restrictions as hellish and outlined the sectors of the aggressor country's economy that would be targeted.
To defend themselves. In terms of Russia, I will be introducing sanctions on their banking sector and on their energy sector next week, urging them to get to the table. If they don't engage in ceasefire and peace talks with the administration, we should sanction the hell out of them.
Although these statements appear contradictory, analysts suggest there is a strategic logic behind them. The US aims to leverage sanctions to pressure Russia into making concessions as part of a ceasefire agreement.
Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now. I am strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. Donald Trump, President of the United States, on Truth Social.
By simultaneously considering both easing and tightening sanctions, the White House is preparing for two scenarios. Either Russia agrees to concessions or it disregards Washington's efforts to achieve peace in Ukraine.
The first approach is a strategy of easing sanctions. The idea is that by lifting some restrictions on the oil and gas sector, Russian oil and gas sector owners could be encouraged to support Trump's initiative for a peace agreement. The second approach is a strategy of maximum pressure. Before any real negotiations begin, Trump escalates sanctions, placing Russia in an even more difficult economic position that it currently faces.
The US has not discussed a potential easing of sanctions against Russia with the European Union. We are not at that stage yet, stated US Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Obviously, the Europeans have their own set of sanctions, and we can't. They'll have to make their decision about what they're willing to do. Marco Rubio, US Secretary of State, speaking to the press.
Over the years of Russia's war against Ukraine, the EU has imposed sanctions on 2,400 individuals and entities. However, their validity is set to expire on March 15. Brussels plans to expand the sanctions for another 6 months, a move supported by 26 EU countries, with the exception of Hungary. Prime Minister Viktor Orban is blocking the extension, aligning with Washington's policy, while also demanding concessions from Brussels.
Budapest, over the past 3 years, has weaponized the periodic sanctions renewal as a bargaining chip and has repeatedly sought to remove some of the sanctioned individuals. There's no way to dance around Budapest this time, since sanctions require unanimous agreement from all 27 EU countries. That gives Orban much more leverage to extract whatever he might want to threaten to blow up the deal for real. From Euractiv publication.
In Brussels, even if informally, preparations are underway for the possibility that Budapest may obstruct the extension of sanctions against Russia. If Hungary continues its blockade, the final decision will be added to the agenda of the EU Foreign Affairs Council meeting on March 17. At this meeting, the foreign ministers of the 26 EU states will seek ways to pressure Hungary into agreeing to the sanctions extension. Reported by Katerina Bastun, Valeria Nikipelova, UATV News.
Construction, coal industry, transport, engineering and the automotive industry, 4 sectors of the Russian economy at risk, reported to Putin by Deputy Prime Minister of Russia Alexander Novak. These sectors are at risk due to their solvency indicators or the need for credit restructuring, Novak explained. The real reason for these problems is not disclosed by the Kremlin. Publicly, neither Putin nor his officials admit to the dire state of the economy, though it has become impossible to ignore the catastrophic trends.
President Vladimir Putin has grown increasingly concerned about distortions in Russia's wartime economy, but domestic activity has become strained in recent months by labor shortages and high interest rates introduced to tackle inflation, which has accelerated under record military spending. That has contributed to the view within a section of the Russian elite that a negotiated settlement to the war is desirable, according to two of the sources familiar with thinking in the Kremlin, from a Reuters publication.
Record military spending has driven inflation. The response, higher interest rates, have led to Russian business being unable to service their credit debt, according to estimates from Russia's Center of Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting. 1 in 5 industrial enterprises in Russia is at risk. This means we can expect a significant number of corporate bankruptcies in the near future. Experts predict that 2025 will be a year of tightening belts for the Russian economy. The International Monetary Fund forecasts that economic growth in Russia will slow by nearly 3 times to just 1.5%.
Издержки высокие, плюс, конечно, сейчас идет.
Costs are high. There is an increase in all resources that are consumed. Not everything has manifested yet. This year, we will most likely see a sharp rise in railway tariffs, as well as a sharp increase in road transport tariffs. There is also a big crisis in road transportation, which will affect the final product prices in supermarkets. On the industrial market, costs are increasing.
Russia's response to any crisis, repression. Putin has ordered the police to, quote, ensure economic security and cleanse the country of corruption. In Russia, anyone deemed connected to the West or insufficiently loyal to the regime can be blamed for economic issues. Over the first 10 months of 2024, Russia opened 18,000 corruption cases. In some cases, this led to the nationalization of private businesses.
For instance, corrupt origins became the grounds for the nationalization of Russia's largest pasta producer, Makfa. According to the Moscow Times, 29 companies were nationalized for violating anti-corruption laws, from the Moscow Times publication.
Price increases, inflation, and a shortage of workers. Moscow continues to deny the negative impact of sanctions on the economy, but the effect is clear, as are the results of record financial and human resource expenditures to continue Russia's war against Ukraine.
В России инфляция многофакторная.
In Russia, inflation is multifaceted. The central bank tries to make it seem like everything is only about the insane influx of money. This is not true. It's convenient for them to explain that a lot of money is being pumped into the budget. They now try to claim that the Ministry of Finance is spending less money, which is very laughable. If the Ministry of Finance had its way, it would spend less money, but the military demands, give us money. So what can the Ministry of Finance do?
In 2025, the Russian economy will become even more dependent on the military-industrial complex, according to British intelligence. This is due to inflationary pressure and corporate defaults in civilian industries. In 2025, inflation in Russia will exceed the central bank's target of 4%. If interest rates remain high, businesses' pressure will grow. For ordinary Russians, this means further price increases on consumer goods are inevitable. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.